my first guest for the day, Professor Saul Sandoval Perea, a professor in the Department of Business and Management at CETYS University in Tijuana, Mexico. He's an expert on politics, economics, and business, and he focuses on Mexico and Latin America, and he's here to catch us up on really what is the chaos that's ensued in Venezuela after Sunday's election. If you heard my report just now, the sitting president, Nicolas Maduro, has refused to acknowledge that he's lost the election, despite the fact that the opposition party has released data, some 80% of all of the vote tallies, that shows, in fact, that they gained something in the range of about 2/3 of all the vote versus about 1/3 for Maduro. The United States government, meanwhile, has called on Nicolas Maduro to release the results of the election and has frankly declared and identified the opposition party leader as the winner of the race. So thank you for joining us, Professor Sandoval.
Thank you for having me again, James.
So let's just go right into, your assessment of where things stand right now in Venezuela, and we should let the audience know, just by way of background, a little bit of background, in that Venezuela was once, not too long ago, a very successful country, if you will, with regards to its economy. It had a strong economy. It's a leading source of oil in the region. And it's seen a massive decline in its economic health in recent years. And with that, I think the last estimates are something like 7 million Venezuelans have left the country. Correct me if I have that number wrong, but several million Venezuelans have left the country because of the crash in the economy. And President Nicolas Maduro is basically now saying, as a result of Sunday's election, that he won and that he doesn't intend to leave office. Talk about your assessment of where things stand right now.
Yes, I think you mentioned a key word here, which is chaos. Right now, the situation in Venezuela is chaotic. I guess we could anticipate this. It was in the making, this political turmoil that we are living now. Yes, Venezuela, as you rightly pointed out, was a country that was doing economically much better than now.
Mm-hmm.
Before, we need to go back to early 2000, when President Chavez was still in power.
Mm-hmm. President Hugo Chavez, yeah.
Exactly, Hugo Chavez, since around 1999. And during his tenure, the situation at some point was getting better, mainly because oil prices were high. However, by 2010, oil prices began to decrease, and then that fact made clear that the political and economic structure constructed by the Chavez administration were not that strong. Then Chavez passed away in 2013, and his right hand, Nicolas Maduro, reached power. Since then, the situation has been worse. Oil prices plummeted, and he showed right away his autocratic style in terms of government. In Venezuela, you are elected for president for 6 years. He was elected in 2012 and then moving to 2018. In 2018, he was reelected with serious doubts about the electoral process. And now in 2024, he was reelected again. And this all happened this week. The opposition claims that they won and that the current government doesn't want to show the electoral data.
May I ask?
Yes.
When he was elected the first time, was he popular? Did people support his election in significant numbers? And then second question would be, what has driven so many Venezuelans to leave the country? And many of them, of course, have ended up here in the United States.
Exactly, around 800,000 now in the U.S. Yes, he was popular, mainly because of the image of Hugo Chavez, right? He was his right hand, and the people still believed in the Chavez regime even after he passed away. But his style, he's not Chavez. He doesn't have the same charisma, and his style is totally different from Chavez. And his governance skills are not the best, right?
Hmm.
This is a struggle between ideologies, economic ideologies, and he showed that the struggle between a socialist or a planned economy versus a capitalist system. Venezuela has a mixed economy, although tilted towards a more socialist economy. And we've seen that those models don't work, right? But he was stubborn in trying to make Venezuela a more socialist style country and economy with the consequences that we've seen. So people are leaving Venezuela because they don't find enough job opportunities. The economic scenario is really
It's really bread and butter issues. I
hard.
mean, it's bread and butter. I mean, inflation.
Exactly.
It's the
Inflation
prices are
has
too high.
skyrocketed.
Yeah, shortage of
Political.
supplies, shortage of goods that people need, to purchase. Right? It's sort of kind of the bread and butter stuff that people depend on. But tell me this also: has there been substantial repression, political repression over the years, and has that grown?
Exactly. Yes, there have been a lot of political repression, political violence. So this is pretty much an authoritarian regime, and we saw this the dark face of the regime this week when they didn't want to recognize the results, and they are doing what they can to remain in power.
An interesting twist now is that the candidate who for the opposition who won, or I'm sorry, I should say, is officially has lost, but has, based on the vote tallies, apparently actually won the election. Edmundo González Urrutia. He was, I guess, he wasn't expected to be the candidate until Maria Corina Machado was essentially banned from running for president, although she has been obviously part of the campaign. But speaking of repression, I understand that she is now in hiding, afraid that she will be jailed by the Maduro government. So, when we talked earlier about chaos, I mean, it really is a chaotic situation, isn't it?
It is. So Maduro has different options to try to continue with his plan. One of these options is just to exert even more pressure on the opposition by arresting political opponents so that the situation can be under control under his terms. And actually, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to arrest Maria Corina Machado and even Edmundo González Urrutia, so that they can get back political control in the country. But
to shut them up.
Scenario.
I mean, to shut them up. That's their goal right now.
That's one political alternative that they have. We can see different scenarios, James, what is going to happen, and also the influence of international actors, international countries.
Well, I was going to ask that. I mean, is there, my understanding is that about 16 countries have basically said, Mr. Maduro, you need to provide the election results, the official election results, and they essentially are signaling that he should withdraw, right, his opposition to to this. But how much influence does the United States and other countries like Mexico, for instance, truly have on Maduro? Is he likely to listen?
Yeah, you also mentioned the right word, the true influence that these countries can have. Well, we've seen that they haven't had a lot of influence, because even though the U.S. has imposed some sanctions on Venezuela through not allowing them to sell oil to the States, the Venezuela government has been able to divert those sanctions by selling oil to other countries and then resell it. Right. So right now the U.S. is sort of like a tide because of the international situation. We have conflicts in the Middle East. We have conflicts in Europe, Eastern Europe, with Ukraine and Russia, and also we have the political campaign in the U.S. Full throttle.
Oh my God!
So
Yes.
it is unlikely that the U.S. will do more than economic sanctions for the short term.
Our attention obviously is focused in many ways on so many other issues, as you mentioned, the Ukrainian war and Middle East and etc. But should the U.S. government, though, I'm not sure if this is quite the right phrasing, take some of the responsibility for having allowed things to get as far as they have gotten in Venezuela, because its attention tends to be more focused overseas across the Atlantic, or even on what's going on in Taiwan, and not necessarily paying that much attention to what's going on in Latin America. And this has been a brewing problem for a long time.
Exactly. It's a problem in the making. Well, the U.S. has had an important policy towards Latin America. But yeah, it is true that other international commitments have taken more attention for the U.S. now. Yeah, we saw the rise of Chavez, all the rhetoric against the U.S. since 2000. Even President Trump threatened to send military troops to Venezuela during his term.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Yes.
Yes, but he just threatened to do that, right? But I guess it's not a priority in terms of U.S. foreign policy.
Well, we've got about a minute in this segment, but let me close this segment by asking you if you could briefly predict, if you can, or try to predict what's going to happen. Is Maduro just going to stick it out and scoff at all the naysayers, or is there likely to be a shift and a change in government there?
I think in the short term he will remain there, and the international community will increase sanctions towards Venezuela, and who's going to suffer? Venezuelan people. According to some polls, some Venezuelans have stated that if Maduro wins again, they will flee the country. Around 30% of those interviewed are doing that. So we expect to see more people leaving the country for the short term.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to close out this segment, and when we come back, we're going to be speaking to Professor Sandoval about Mexico and kind of where things stand right now as the new president-elect, Claudia Sheinbaum, prepares to take office in October. And I'd also love to hear from you, Professor Sandoval, your thoughts on how the U.S. election is tying in, especially now with Vice President Kamala Harris on the ticket. So we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us on Vanguardia America. I'm your host, James Garcia. Welcome back. I'm your host, James Garcia. Thank you for joining us. We're going to return to my interview with Professor Sandoval, but we're going to switch gears now from Venezuela to Mexico and talk about Claudia Sheinbaum, who is the first female president-elect and president-to-be in Mexico. And we're also going to be talking about Kamala Harris a bit and kind of the influence that the U.S. may have on Mexico in the coming years and vice versa. Thank you, Professor Sandoval, for joining us.
Sure. Thank you.
So to the question, first of all, what's the latest with Claudia Sheinbaum? Is she essentially adjusting to her new role as president-elect, and is there great anticipation of that in Mexico?
Yes, well, she's in the transition period. It's going to be a very smooth transition period because the incumbent president comes from the same political party, and they are very close. What she's been doing is trying to form her cabinet for the presidency that will go from 2024 to 2030. She's been giving some speeches outlining how she sees or expects her government to be, right?
Is she already building relations with U.S. officials? Has she been meeting with U.S. government officials as she prepares for the transition?
She hasn't done that, but she spoke with Vice President Kamala Harris after she won the election. I think it was after the election was on June the 2nd. I think she spoke with Vice President Harris around the 3rd or 4th of June. And they just share experiences and talk about the future in terms of the U.S.-Mexico relations.
Should we expect sort of a consistency in terms of the relationship between the two countries in the coming years, and particularly on immigration? Obviously, that's always a hot topic between the two countries, and Mexico has played a role in, for instance, the Remain in Mexico policy and other policies that are connected to U.S. immigration policy. Do we expect that to continue, or do you think that there might be a shift if Sheinbaum comes in? Well, she will come in, and of course, if Kamala Harris actually gets elected. Is there anything that's likely to change?
I think we expect to see more changes, more dramatic changes, if candidate or former President Trump wins.
Yes.
Because he is coming back. He has promised to be even more aggressive on immigration this time, and also on drug trafficking, and on the economy as well in terms of U.S.-Mexico relations. With Kamala Harris, we should expect to see more continuity in terms of President Biden's border policies. Although Vice President Harris, she was one of the senators that actually opposed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement on the grounds of environmental concerns.
The revision of it, the revision of NAFTA, which has now been
exactly the revision of NAFTA in 2020. And now we're going to start next year another review process of the agreement, and President Trump will also press hard on some areas of the agreement, but also President Harris, if she wins, right? She's going to be very, she's going to pay a lot of attention to environmental standards in both in Mexico and in the U.S., and also she will listen to the claims and complaints about American unions in terms of the benefits that the agreement offers to Mexican workers and to Mexican companies in general.
Yeah, she has come out very strongly as essentially suggesting that she's going to pick up right where President Biden left off in terms of her support of the unions. And that, as you just noted, will play into our relationship with them. But on the other side, if Mr. Trump somehow gets back into office, he's talking about the mass deportation of millions of people. And I assume that if he's talking about dumping them somewhere, Mexico is going to be a likely destination for that. I mean, what kind of chaos would that create? And we have about 2 minutes before we end this segment. But what kind of chaos could that possibly create if millions of people are simply dumped across the border?
Exactly. Again, so Mexico is going to bear the consequences, and can elect the elected the president, Sheinbaum. Also, I've seen a trait of her that doesn't help. She, in line with President López Obrador, she has expressed that Mexico now should be viewed as an equal partner in the U.S., that not adopting a submissive attitude towards the U.S. So it's sort of like a signaling a more assertive position for Mexico, even to some extent a little bit aggressive. And if you combine President Trump attitudes with Sheinbaum's attitudes, then we see a lot of chaos and a lot of political tension and economic tension between the U.S. and Mexico. I think it will be smoother if Kamala Harris wins, because she sees more border issue in a more comprehensive way. So I think we'll see greater cooperation with Harris and more difficult cooperation with Trump in terms of Mexico.
Professor Sandoval is based in Tijuana, Mexico. He's an expert on politics, economics, and business. I want to thank you, Professor Sandoval Perea, for joining us again, being on the show, and we'd love to have you back as things get a little closer to the November election to make an assessment on what's been happening between our two countries again. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you to Vanguardia America and to you, James. Have a good one.
Thank you.